Tonight, we have a great privilege of having two speakers. The speakers will actually speak in a different order than it's on the slide. The first speaker is going to be Dr. Provena Shukla, who is an associate professor of folklore and ethnomusicology or musicology at Indiana University in Bloomington. Her research is on dress and body adornment, as well as food and material culture. She wrote the book, The Grace of Four Moons, Dress, Adornment, and the Art of the Body in Modern India. Our bookstore has copies of that book outside, and Pravina will sign a copy of the book if you should desire her to do the autographing. This book was given an award, the 2009 Millia Davenport Award, given by the Costume Society of America. Tonight she will speak about dress in India and share her research that she has conducted in the city of Varanasi, which is in northern India. Varanasi as a town is famous for mmany things. It's a very holy religious place, but it is also famous for the Banarasi sari, a sari that most Indian brides wear as part of their bridal trousseau, and almost every Indian woman of, I guess, some economic means owns one. I was tempted to wear one of them tonight, but it would have been a little bit over the top. So, but Pravina will show us pictures and share her research on the Banarasi sari. Please welcome Dr. Provena Shukla.
Can everybody hear me? I want to begin by thanking a few people. I want to thank Ruby Dholakia, Nick Dholakia, Arun Shukla, Linda Welters for allowing me an opportunity to be here once again, to come home to Kingston, Rhode Island. If we can make it darker so that you can see the slides, that'd be better. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this microphone to work. Let me know if you can't hear me. My interest in the forms, functions, and meanings of dress and adornment, especially in the choices individuals make within a web of social constraint, has led me to India to study body art, defined as aesthetic modifications and supplementations to the body. India is a good place to study body adornment due to its immense diversity in the cultures, multiplicity of regional and religious groups. Discrepancies in socioeconomic levels, castes, city and village distinctions are all expressed through dress and adornment, resulting in an instant visual communication, which is particularly relevant in India. Sorry, this is kind of a funny podium light here. Because of the nature of Hinduism. The main religion in India, and the concept of darshan, sacred vision. The importance of vision is both sacred and secular in India, and it sets a cultural precedent for the importance of seeing. In a crowded country like India, eye contact connects and narrows the gap between people temporarily, allowing for messages to be sent and judgments to be made. By reading the coded messages sent to audiences that is familiar with the general parameters and shared visual vocabulary. I study folklore, defined as a study of creativity in everyday life. Today, I would like to sketch a model for the study of saris, the unstitched women's garment 6 meters in length, in line with the folkloristic study of material culture. Material culture, defined actually by Henry Glassie, the next speaker, elegantly defined as culture made material. We understand culture Everything we understand of culture is manifest in the world through objects. That's, in essence, material culture. So this model that I'm going to sketch for you has 3 segments. The first one is production. In this first part, there is an intervention in nature. There's a creation of an object that can be alienated from its maker. You're looking right now at a picture of a gold ingot being melted. The object in this production cycle then goes through, in this picture, Salik Ram Soni is a stone setter, Gopal Prasad Minikar, the enameler, and a set of artists working together create the finished product. This is a close-up of a diamond choker made by this particular group of people, the front and the back. Pink enameling, miniature work. So that's the first phase. We have production. Something's actually made, taking nature and making it. The second phase then becomes exchange. In this phase, there's communication. The object moves from one person to the other. The third phase then is consumption. Now the object is possessed and it is used. It is not only used in production, it's used in a second cycle of creation. There's now an intervention not in nature, but in culture. There's a creation of an object into an assemblage. In this case, gold jewelry is combined with a silk brocaded sari, combined with rings, combined with makeup, combined with perfume, all into a particular ensemble. The art of assemblage is important in contemporary life. It could be defined as the making of things out of things, of putting things together in a meaningful combination. Assemblage occurs in home decoration, in gardens, in altars, also in museum exhibitions. And the most common form of assemblage, one that every single one of us engaged in this morning, is the art of getting dressed, of putting items of clothing together. In the realm of material culture, dress, along with architecture and food, fulfills basic human needs for protection and creativity while responding to environmental and social conditions. People wear the clothes that symbolize their cultural identity and historic period. Clothing obviously expresses identity. Nobody in this room would deny that. But a closer, deeper look reveals the complexities in the production, marketing, and consumption of items of bodily adornment. I would like to make specific, in place, in India, the application of the model of the study of material culture to the study of adornment, more specifically to the study of saris. So with that, come with me to Banaras. This is Varanasi, called Banaras, in the northeast of India. I did field work in Banaras for 3 extended periods between 1996 and 2003. Banaras is known by many people as what they call the Hindu Mecca. This is the place where you go to die. This is a place where you make a pilgrimage in your life. It's the most important Hindu pilgrimage site in India. It's a good place to live and a good place to die, a place to escape the cycle of rebirth. The city has 1 million residents. The neighboring villages come and shop there, and most importantly, there's 3 million yearly pilgrims, extending threefold the population of the city. The city also is about 60% Hindu, 40% Muslim, so it's a place to study the religious dynamic of India. And most importantly, this is the place of my family. All my family is from Banaras. I've gone to Banaras my whole life. I use my knowledge of it in my analysis of dress in India. So let's look at this, the way to understand mature culture by looking specifically at Banaras. The first phase is production. Banaras is, as Ruby said, famous for Banarasi saris. They're silk brocaded saris. They're woven, hand woven in one of 3 neighborhoods in India, in Banaras, by a team of 2. There are 200,000 weavers in the city of Banaras today, hand weaving these things. 200,000 weavers, 75% of them are Muslim. Most of them have the last name Ansari. My main informant was Hashim Ansari, and this is how he explained to me the dynamic of the family workshop. He said there's a division of labor, and these are his words in English. He said, my youngest brother, which you see here in the white shirt, Moshim Ansari, he's the king of dyes. He dyes the cloth after it's been woven, and he dyes the fabric before it's been woven. My older brother, Hashim Ansari, is a king of machines. His job is to be fixing the finicky looms that are constantly breaking. He himself, Hashim Ansari, called himself the king of the market. He goes and sells the saris. He sees what's being sold, what is being rejected, what's being accepted, what people are wearing on the street. So he's kind of looking at what's happening in terms of the fashion. And his old father, Mr. Abdul Qayyum, he called the king of designs, who puts together the motifs of the sari, the field, the border, and the elaborate end piece, the pallu, puts them all together in his mind. They hire somebody to put that on a graph paper, and then they subcontract out to somebody they call the cardwala. So let's look at this briefly. Here's a Jacquard loom, if you haven't seen one. The Jacquard loom combines the old Indian pit loom with the intricate Jacquard system of perforated cards that control the woven textile, and the Jacquard loom, the Jacquard part is a French invention of the 19th century. So we have the loom. This is the loom in which the sari is made. On the top of the loom, there's these cards that once pressed by the weaver, the card shifts into place and it lifts certain warp threads. These cards have to be made by somebody. In this case, this family worked with Manoj Kumar, who was the cardwala. And that's what they call him, the cardwala. So the cardwala has to take the design, the sari on the graph paper you see, look at each line and punch the right holes on that card to make it so that when the card is fed into the loom, it actually lifts the right threads in order for the weaver to weave that particular design. Here's the cards. They're going to lift the weft. Here you see it. They'll be woven by somebody, in this case Muhammad Shahid, and the final design is a brocaded, extra weft brocaded silk Banarasi sari. So this would be the result. Takes about 2 weeks to make it. So let's quickly then generalize by looking at this example, the pattern of creation, that first production, the first phase. We see the tradition is old and it is Muslim in this holy Hindu city. Technology is complex. There's a division of labor. It requires a team. It requires cooperation. There's hierarchy and negotiations. That's the first phase. The second phase is exchange. In this one, there's actually 2 things that are happening. The sari is exchanged from the maker to the retailer, in this case at the weekly sari market at Golghar. And then the second phase includes the retailer selling it to the customer. In this case, Hemant Kanchandani owns a store and sells to the customer. The buying of clothes, like the buying of jewelry in India, has a similar pattern. We're going to use this slide of a gold shop to generalize on that pattern. What happens here, if you've been to Indian shop, you come in as a group of women. In this case, there's Muslim women in the front, Hindu women in the back. You come in, you sit down, you tell the seller, Ramesh Pandey, what you want in the white shirt. Ramesh tells the owner, Piyush Agrawal, in the red shirt, what he thinks, what his understanding of what you want. Piyush Agrawal tells Chashi Bhai in the vault what he thinks, the seller thinks you want. And this goes back and forth, and it's a negotiation, and what you end up having is input of every single person involved in that particular process. So what we see then in this level of exchange in which buying and shopping has that much mediation, there is a negotiation and interaction between people of different socioeconomic classes, caste, religion, gender. So then we can now quickly generalize the pattern of exchange. There's an initial exchange between the maker and the retailer. The subsequent exchange between the retailer and the merchant. This exchange is mediated, in which people are interacting. There is a dynamic of gender, class, caste, religion that's taking place in this particular process. Finally, the first phase then is consumption. Women will go and shop mostly in groups. It's a social activity, and there's mediation, as we know, from the merchant, as we just saw, but also from the people who you're with. Some people are active shoppers, some are passive shoppers. Some people engage in pre-shopping, in which they go, they take visual inventory of what's available, and when they're ready to shop, they've stored what is available, what is in fashion. With that, then, the goal of shopping is to create an assemblage, an ensemble on your body. Some of the factors that affect the decision of shopping in this third phase then become a couple. One of them is the ensemble positions you in a social setting, in a physical setting. For example, Neelam Chaturvedi here dresses a certain way to work and a certain way to go to the party, right? So what she's choosing the color, the fabric, the style of the blouse. Her ensemble positions her in the social context of work or the social context of a party, for example. Another thing that the ensemble does is position you in the period of your life where you are, the developmental stage of your life. In this photograph, there's 4 women who are, that's part of one family. The 2 women on the outside are married, and they're wearing orange and brighter colors. One is a daughter-in-law, one is a mother-in-law. The mother-in-law is more subdued with a black blouse. The 2 women in the middle, one's pre-marriage, a maiden, one is post-marriage, a widow. So by looking at color, style, absence and presence of jewelry, of makeup, of bindi, there's a lot that's being communicated, so that ensemble is positioning you in a place in your life. The other thing the ensemble does then is position you in the region of where you're from, the region of origin, the region of residence, and in the rite of passage. So one of the main goals for shopping in India is for the marriage dowry and for the marriage outfit. So here's Shalini from UP, Bibha from Calcutta. Again, you can tell by looking at the details of makeup, of clothing, of jewelry, what part of India these brides are from. This is Shalini's hands from Banaras. Namita from Punjab. What we see then is women assert personal choice within existing frames, positioning themselves within the social order. The consumer buys item of clothing and jewelry and puts them into an assemblage. Women assert personal choice within the constraints of physical setting, lifestyle, life cycle, finances, and aesthetics. So let's briefly recap the system. The system has a producer, a merchant, and a customer. We've seen briefly how to understand this object, the sari adornment, by looking at these 3 phases. Each of those people that I talk to think that they command the system. So we got Hashim Ansari, the sari weaver, the producer. Nasir Bhai, the sari store owner, the merchant. And Mukta Tripati, the wearer of saris, the customer. They each told me I'm the person that's driving the system. For example, Mukta said to me, I'm the buyer with my money. I push the maker through the merchant to make the things I will buy. Nasir Bhai said, I'm the merchant. With my orders, I push both the maker and the buyer around. And we saw this mediation. Hashim Ansari said, I'm the maker. It is my family's tradition. We claim the art. We make what we want to make. We push the buyer and the maker to buy and to wear and to sell what we're making. When something is made, once an item has been made, exchanged, it is then subject to evaluation. This is performance theory. Something is made and is evaluated. This is one of the definitions of performance theory. The matter of assessment is both personal and cultural. In assessment, all the variables unite. The successful product gains praise or envy. The failed prompts reprimand and ridicule. This keeps with the paradigm of performance, in which an act of communication is artistically rendered to be evaluated by an audience. Let's look at the evaluation of a Banarasi sari. I asked each of these people, what's an excellent example of a sari, of a Banarasi sari? Hashim Ansari said, as the weaver, the most important thing in the sari is the design. The design holds the sari together. Then the color, and then the fabric. Also the weight. The weight is a result of the fabric choice and the amount of brocading. And that has to do with the season. What fabric, how much brocading has to do with the season. That affects literally the weight of the sari. Then, only then, will the eye focus in on the weaving mistakes. Sorry, the screen just went blank. Nasir Bhai, the seller, said the craftsmanship is the most important thing. The smoothness of the web, it should not have shading or streaking when you hold it up to the light, which is a result in uneven seating of the weft when the weaver beats down the weft with inconsistent force. Also the warp count. A sari should have between 6,000 to 8,000 threads, which makes for finer detail and better design. Also fabric, quality and color are important. That's the assessment of the seller. Oops. Sorry, I went the wrong way. Did that just go crazy? Just one more. Thank you very much. Finally, I asked the wearer, the woman, right, the only woman in this thing, what makes an excellent sari? And she said to me, how it looks on my body. It should not be bulky. Who wants 6 meters of folded, draped, and tucked fabric? It should flatter my figure. The design is important, but not just abstract design, but what happens to be currently in fashion. Also color, not abstract color, but the color that suits my particular skin tone. And fabric, I like silk in the winter because it's warm. I like chiffon in the rainy season because it dries quickly under the ceiling fan. This is the only person that actually wears a sari and has a particular assessment about the fabric. There's a hierarchy of creation as we see. Different categories of people focus on different features. Though they emphasize things differently, they all take into account the same things. Design, craftsmanship, and the material, the fabric, the color of the particular material. In sari evaluation, we see that while the evaluation differs, They don't necessarily conflict, they just emphasize different things. These people are all co-cultural. There's a tight system of aesthetics and social hierarchy. All have a sense that they command the hierarchy in this particular case. These people are interlocked into a system that satisfies individual needs and is coherent and working within a cultural framework. The object serves both the individual and the collective. As a sari moves, there are real tensions as it switches from one person to another. There's tensions that arise in the differences of prosperity. We saw that it goes from worker to boss. There's a difference of social class, religion from Muslim to Hindu, and gender from men to women. At the end, the individual has a sense of personal power. The weaver is the boss of his own art. He controls the execution. He creates a work of art. The store owner is the boss of his own social world. He gets to push people around. He gets to have the pleasure of being the patron. The woman is a boss of her own self-presentation. She answers the question every day, who am I today? By choosing to craft her own self-presentation, using her buying power to be served by men for hours sometimes, subverting the usual gender dynamics, albeit temporarily. To understand our garment fully, we must look at the social life, its value as it moves between the active context of creation, exchange, consumption, ending up perhaps into inactive contexts in a museum exhibition, in a store, in a storeroom, illustrated in a scholarly book, forgotten in a closed closet, maybe in a home in Kingston, Rhode Island. Through an item of material culture, the sari in Banaras, different categories of people come together, men and women, Hindu and Muslim, rich and poor, artist, merchant, customer. These people come together to create social order and a sense of consumption and community, uniting themselves by their respective relationship to the sari in modern India. Thank you.
We'll have the question and answer session after Henry finishes speaking. It's a real privilege to introduce the next speaker, Henry Glassie, who is Professor Emeritus of Folklore, also from Indiana University. Professor Glassie has received many, many distinctions and awards, and I'm just keeping it brief. But his most recent award, which was just announced last week, is the 2011 Charles Homer Haskins Prize, awarded by the American Council of Learned Societies. This is one of the highest distinctions given in the humanities to one scholar per year. He was recognized for his intellectual leadership that broadened the discipline of folklore. His commitment to art and artists has rendered his sort of folklore study unique. What's particularly distinctive is after Henry Glassie got this award, this presentation tonight at URI is his first public presentation after having been given this distinction. And so I think URI is particularly privileged to have him speak tonight. He will be talking about the sacred images in modern India. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Henry Glassie.
Is everything working here? Great. It needs to be dark, because if you don't understand what I say, it really doesn't matter. But if you don't see the pictures, it does matter. It's a wonderful honor to be here, to meet new friends, to be in old territory, familiar countryside that is beautiful and envious. So we've come all the way from Indiana to talk to you about India, a curiosity. But this is a great delight for us, and thank you so much for your time, your attention, for coming out on this lovely night. Demystifying India. I think I'd be more interested in mystifying India, or at the very least reminding us that in the act of demystification, it's necessary for us to admit, to accept, to realize that India is also a place of mystery. Profound in India is the tremendous diversity of mystical religious traditions. In India there are Hindus and Sikhs and Jains, Christians and Jews, and there are more Muslims in India than there are in most of the Muslim nations of the world. That is to say, India is a place of amazing religious diversity. I, however, am going to stress that diversity by staying within the frame of Hinduism, the most important and dominant of the religions of India, and speak of the varieties that appear within the framework of Hinduism. I make to begin a couple of simple assertions. One of them is that Hinduism, like the religions of ancient Greece and Rome, like the religions of West Africa, is a concatenation of formally distinct cults. Polymorphic, Hinduism has no great text in the way that Islam has a great text or Christianity has a great text. Instead, it has a great many wonderful texts, but because of the diversity of those texts, because of the polyphony of the polymorphous tradition, it's necessary in Hinduism to center itself on something that is transtextual, transliterary. That is, Hinduism is centered less on the text than it is on the image. And so it is in all the world's polytheistic religions. That is to say that they are centered less on writing than they are on vision. At the very center of Hinduism is the image, the murti, in this case of Lord Shiva. I have entered this world not through the object, but rather through its maker, in exactly the same way that Pravina was primarily concerned in talking to you about the clothing of India in terms of the makers and the sellers and the wearers of that clothing. I'm primarily interested in the ways in which the artistic tradition of the makers of murtis allows the maker of murti to have a tremendous religious power within the larger frame of the world of 1 billion Indians. You're looking at my friend Babulal Pal in the village of Kamarpara in East Bengal. Babulal, for his own worship, made this image of Radha and Krishna. He would tell you, were you to ask, that it is an image of love. What it does, this image, is in the act of devotion, in the way that you sit before, in the way that you contemplate, in the way that you come into an engagement with this image, you are drawn into a circle of love. It is your job as a devotee to look at Radha. And Radha looks at Krishna, and Krishna looks at you. You, therefore, are brought with Radha and Krishna into an endless circle of perfect love, and that is the goal, that's the function, according to Babulal Pal, that's the function of the murti, is to bring you into a circle of eternal love. I'm going to take us back for this talk, to begin, to the same city of Varanasi, of Banaras, in North India. You've just been there to learn about the clothing, and now you're going to be there for a minute to learn about the making of murtis. This is the city of Lord Shiva. Every night at the main ghat, there is an arti for Shiva. And if you walk away from the main ghat, you will find that everywhere in Banaras there are images of Shiva, This is the city of Shiva. This is the very, very best place to die. But at the same time, Shiva, being one of the images and one of the deities of Hinduism, is not alone in the streets of Banaras. Instead, along with Lord Shiva, you will find all of the Hindu deities represented. This may be Shiva's city, but Shiva must open his power to welcome into engagement all of the great deities of Hinduism. If you walk around the streets of Banaras, and I've done it, and if you walked around all the streets of Banaras, and I've done it, and if you counted up the images that are available to the worshiper, you will find that Lord Shiva does not dominate at all, but the streets are dominated by two other deities. One is Ganesh. Well, Ganesh is, of course, the Lord of beginnings, and Ganesh is, of course, the first of all deities to be worshipped. From the very beginning of time, it was decreed that as a result of his love for his father Shiva, he would be worshipped before all of the other deities. The act of worship begins with Lord Ganesh. Lord Ganesh is a guardian of portals. He's a guardian of roads. He's that person who puts you on the path to success. And so inevitably all worship, all devotional acts would begin with Lord Ganesh. And if you would like, you can find that there's an obvious connection to Shiva, this Lord of this city, because of the fact that Ganesh is the son of Shiva, but really not, of course. He's really the son of Parvati, who is Shiva's wife, and Shiva, it turns out, of course, if you know your mythology, had nothing to do with the birth of Ganesh. He was created entirely from the body of Parvati. So while you can welcome Ganesh into worship in the city of Shiva because he is the son of Shiva, at the very same time you have to acknowledge that he welcomes into the whole pantheon his mother Parvati. And Parvati is in power Durga and in rage Kali. And so, in fact, the second of the great deities of Hinduism, Devi, the goddess, has been brought in by the presence of Lord Ganesh. But by far the most dominant of the images that are painted on the streets of Banaras is Hanuman. Ask why? Well, Hanuman is the living God. There are still monkeys, there is still Hanuman. He is the living God. Furthermore, it's clear that he was instrumental in teaching Tulsidas the story that became the Ramayana. But more than that, Hanuman opens his chest like the Sacred Heart in order to reveal his love for Lord Ram and Sita. And so he welcomes the other of the great gods, Vishnu, of whom Ram is an avatar, into your understanding. However, the people of Shiva will tell you that Hanuman is in fact an avatar of Lord Shiva, and never could Ram have accomplished the victory of the Ramayana without the aid of Hanuman, therefore of Shiva. Travel back from the Ghats along Vishwanath Gali in Banaras, past the Golden Temple, the great temple to Shiva, and you'll find yourself, and this is where we're headed, at the Jaipur Murti Bandar. This is one of many stores at the end of the street that sell images of the deities, all the deities. But if you look in the stores and you'd like to think about the political economy of contemporary India, what you'll almost always find is that the leading deities for sale, for private worship, are Durga and Hanuman. They connect, and connect obviously. Durga, Parvati in her position as power, is the one who defeated the buffalo demon. Hanuman led to the defeat of the demon Ravan. Both Durga and Hanuman brought the world that we inhabit into order. Both of them represent power, and in a resurgent Hinduism in modern India, Durga and Hanuman are the right deities to be worshipped. We'll pass beyond the selling of these images and find yourself in the workshop, and you're tracing the trail of the kind of work that Pravina and I do, looking for the places where we can find the men who make the things, the women who make the things. And here you find Rajesh Kumar Gao, who is the master of the Jaipur Murti Bandar. And if you ask him, as I have, what is the source of the knowledge of the gods? It should be that he would refer to a text. Instead, he says, not at all. He said, in our workshop, we manufacture two kinds of things. One of the kinds of things that we make are portraits, and portraits are based on photographs, and photographs are of real living people. The others are images of the deities, and those images of the deities, murtis, depend entirely on kalpana. They depend entirely upon imagination. Rajesh said, no one has ever seen the gods, so the only way that we can have for worship an image of the god is that the artist is capable of imagining what the god looks like, in this case, Hanuman. And the way that it happens is there are no plans, there are no drawings, there's no preparation at all. Instead, marble stone is brought in from Rajasthan to the city of Banaras. It's carved by men and then painted. It's interesting, given our understanding of the way that ancient Greek sculpture was, or that medieval sculpture was, that we're inevitably look at that sculpture in terms of its form, but the great masters in this workshop are the painters. The great masters of ancient Greece may well have been the painters. The great masters of medieval art may have been the painters. But certainly in modern Banaras, the man who matters is Sindranath Singh, who at the end of the carving act paints the image, which is then in the storehouse, and then the executive committee of the temple comes. They select the image is installed, and once it's installed, it becomes a device of communication between the worlds. My friend, the great master of murti making, Horipada Pal, once called the murti a mediator. And when I said then it brings people and gods together, it effectively introduced people to gods and gods to people. And he said, yes, that's true. But he says it's better to think of it as a communication device. And how strange it is that we think it's so amazing to have invented a telephone that allows people in America to talk to people in India, when we, thousands of years ago, invented a statue that connects us from this world into the invisible world. Not a few miles or 1,000 miles, not even 1,000,000 miles, but into an entire other dimension. What you're looking at, in effect, according to Haripada Pal, is a telephone you can use to talk to God. The device connects. It is a device of exchange. It stands between the divine and the mundane. It stands between the seen and the unseen. It allows you to be able to strike a deal with the gods that will help you struggle through this ultimately miserable place. That's a story from North India. North India is where Pravina took you, and North India is where I've taken you. But now, for contrast, I'm going to take you to South India. And in South India, I'm going to take you to the city of Madurai, which has the same sacred power for Tamil Nadu that Banaras has for UP. And you're looking at the great Minakshi Temple. Outsiders, creators of posters, will represent India inevitably by the Taj Mahal. But you get inside the Indian world and you find the Taj Mahal is matched by another great building, far less famous in international circles, but every bit as famous in the subcontinent, and that's the Minakshi Temple. Founded around 1200, continued to develop into the 18th century. This great temple has 12 gopuras, and you're looking at one, and if you go close to it, what you'll find is that every one of those towering, gigantic objects is completely encrusted with images of the gods. Inside, there are places for quiet worship. Outside, there's a story to be told. The temple is completely coated with amazing images of Hindu power. They come in no order, and intentionally in no order, because what has to happen is the viewer has to project upon all of these images a syntax. And that syntax will be the narrative of the goddess Minakshi. Minakshi is the South Indian deity who is parallel to the North Indian Parvati. She too goes into rage and becomes like Kali. She too can ascend to pure, absolute power and become like Durga. But her story is distinct. Her story is that she was born with 3 breasts. And there was a prediction made at her birth that until she met a man who was her match in power, she would continue to have 3 breasts. But at the moment that she finally met a man who was her equal, that man would cause her to become normal and a bride. Effectively, it would diminish her power in order to increase her power. Minakshi set out from her place at the far southern end of India, that point that is down there next to Sri Lanka. And everywhere she went, she called for the competition of males. She challenged any male in any part of the country to come out and meet her, and as soon as that male would appear, she would become swollen into magnificent power and immediately and without effort destroy whatever male she met. And so it happened as she traveled northward through the Indian subcontinent until finally she got into the Himalayan foothills where she met Lord Shiva. And the way that it was told to me as I stood inside the Minakshi Temple in one of my many, many visits to it, she looked at him, he looked at her, and these 2 great, powerful deities both became bashful, shy, sort of silly. And they decided that it was necessary for one of them to be victorious, but they certainly weren't going to have a battle to the death. Minakshi had already won all those battles to the death. Instead, they would have a dancing contest. In that dancing contest, Lord Shiva happens to have kicked the earring off his ear. He sent his foot down to pick up the earring. The foot flew up and put the earring back on the ear. And he said to Minakshi, "Can you match that?" She said, "Of course I could do that, but that's so ungainly, so unladylike to go into such a preposterous posture that you, Lord Shiva, have won." The consequence of this was the unification of Hinduism. That is to say, the brother of Minakshi, Vishnu, gave Minakshi, his sister, to Lord Shiva. These are the 3 great cults of Hinduism, going back far beyond anybody's memory, going back far beyond any written record. There is a Lord Vishnu who's come into the earth in 10 different avatars. There's a Lord Shiva who dances between construction and destruction. And there is a Minakshi who, transformed through rage as Kali into Durga, is the most powerful of all. But at this moment, it's pure peace between these 3 great traditions. They come together and they unify and they have issue, and the issue is baby Ganesh. For he is the child of, he is the 2nd generation of deities. He's the child of Minakshi, Parvati, and Lord Shiva. The 2 of them combine in having a child, and that Lord Ganesh is therefore the symbol, not only the Lord of beginnings, but in the context of this particular narrative, he is the perfect symbol of the unity of Hinduism. That instead of being disparate, it's now perfectly unified. And that image of the Holy Family is to be found in Madurai, in small temples and in street shrines, but everywhere what you see is the Holy Family. Shiva, Minakshi, and baby Ganesh. His images are made by artists like Pichai Velar. And when I asked Pichai what his source of his ideas was, he said that I read Shastra, I read the old texts, I listen to the old men who have been performing the Ramayana repetitively for centuries at the Minakshi Temple. He said, I go into my mind, and in my mind I find these images, and those are the images that I make. But I make them in his mind, as he would express it, in line with the orthodox vision of the dominant images of Hinduism. Now travel just outside the city. The city is dominated by a single image, the image of the Holy Family, the image of Devi with Shiva and their child, Ganesh. But go outside and you'd find that those great deities are imaged only by stones in the ground. And the dominant image is called Ayanar. And Ayanar is celebrated by the manufacture of among the largest ceramic objects that have ever been made by humankind. Gigantic statues that stand tall over the landscape, which are gifts by people to a god who is not Shiva and is not Vishnu and can't possibly be reduced to any of the sort of requisite Hindu deities of your textbooks, but who instead dominates the countryside outside of the great city of Madurai in Tamil Nadu. Being the kind of person that I am, unsatisfied by merely taking photographs of beautiful horses painted and deposited as gifts to Lord Ayanar, I asked if I could go to the center of Ayanar worship. People were perfectly happy to take me there. It was a long walk across a desert and up into the hills until finally I found myself at the ultimate Ayanar temple. So unlike the Minakshi Temple, so unlike the great temples of Banaras. 4 posts driven into the ground, a thatched roof. Under that thatched roof, 2 images. Outside that thatched roof, great standing painted horses. Well, it's not possible, or it is possible, but it's not correct to take pictures inside that temple, and so, of course, I didn't. But it's easy to know what's inside that temple because every year new images are put in. And every year the old images are taken out. And those images are, to your left, Manjamalai Andi, who is the religious advisor of Lord Ayanar, and then to the right, Ayanar with his 2 wives. We seem to have skittered beyond the Hinduism that's talked about in the textbooks. All around this landscape, there are thousands upon thousands of last year's statues. That is to say, every time that a new statue is installed, the old one is not destroyed, as, for example, is done in Bengal. Instead, the old one is just put out in the fields until you begin to travel over acres of landscape in which there are nothing but old, blackened statues that remind you of the tremendous time depth of this religious activity. Well, at this temple, the priest is not a Brahmin. The priest is Aligarh Chettiar, and Aligarh Chettiar happens to be not a Brahmin at all. He happens to be a potter. And he makes utilitarian ware that's necessary for his neighbors to get through another day, but he also makes images of Ayanar. He begins alone with a mantra of praise, calling the power of Lord Ayanar down into the clay. As things proceed, his son-in-law Krishnan comes to help. And then at the end of the procedure, all alone, Aligarh installs the manhood of Ayanar, in which the power of Ayanar abides. He has, through this process, made this image. This image will be burned along with others. One of the kinds of images that will be burned are images of babies that women ask Aligarh Chettiar to make in hopes that their barrenness will be over and that babies will be theirs. Farmers ask for tractors and trucks and agricultural equipment. Aligarh makes all of these things, burns them outdoors, and then they become this year's gifts to the Lord in the temple that's out there way beyond the city, way beyond the village, across a burning plain, up in a mountain, in a tiny temple that you can go to if you want. So Alagar Chettiar makes his image of Ayanar. It's his personally. It's a work of art. It's also a work of devotion, that he is, in his devotion to Ayanar, making as beautiful an image of as possible of Ayanar and his two wives, one old and wise, one young and beautiful. But it's also true that everybody's Ayanar is different. Here's Murugan's Ayanar, which looks nothing like Alagar's Ayanar, because both of them are artists as well. Both of them are devoted in their art. Their art is an act of devotion. Their art is a prayer. Their art is also a public social service. Their art connects them to other people. Their art connects them to themselves as artists, to other people as consumers. But most importantly, their art connects them to the eternal powers. This is then what will unify all the diversity in Hinduism. There is of necessity a place with the smell of incense, a place with the sound of bells, with the sound of chants. There's a place where you take off your shoes. There's a place where life is different from quotidian life, a place that you go into and become a different person, allowed for the swinging of lights, the smell of incense, through the chanting of mantras, to become a different person. In that place that is not a place of the normal, there is an image of power. That image of power deserves from us veneration. The veneration can be simple as the image can be simple. The image can be complex. It really doesn't, I was told, matter as long as you do it with sincerity. I was told of a sadhu who got up every day, took mud, made an image of Lord Ganesh, worshipped it, and threw it back into the river every night. But a great master artist can't possibly do that. That would be an insincere act, and so the great master artist must bear down and make a thing as complicated and as beautiful as it possibly can be. But from the standpoint of response, all it needs is veneration, your statement of participation. And participation, power upon power, is what it amounts to. That finally, despite the differences of the deities, despite all the differences of their apparent functions, despite the differences of their histories, despite the differences of their regional existence, despite the differences of their being orthodox or heterodox, despite the fact of north, south, east, and west, what all of them gather in is a power to which it is necessary for human beings, in order to live a decent life, to come into some kind of relationship. These are the images made by my friends today. This is not the past, this is the present as it's being lived in a relationship to the mysteries of power. Thank you very much.
I think both Pravina and Henry painted absolutely vivid images of India, both in terms of the daily dress and the sacred gods. If you've been to India or if you come from India, brings back fabulous memories. To thank Pravina and Henry, will our students please?
On behalf of the URI Honors Program, we'd like to present our guest speakers with 2 gifts for a very informative and interesting presentation.
Now the floor is open for any questions for our speakers. We have 2 microphones here, and Dr. Glassie and Dr. Shukla, if you want a specific person or both persons, please just clarify your question.
Do you want the questions to be on the microphone, or?
Yes, please can you come down?
This is really formal. I love it.
How much does a typical sari cost to make? Or like how much does it go by?
How much does it cost to buy?
Yes.
That's a good question. The cost depends on the amount of brocading and the amount of work. Let's say a really nice Banarasi sari you could buy for about between $250 to $400.
Okay. Thank you.
I wish I had some for sale right now, but I don't.
I have a question for Henry. In terms of these images of gods, at least in Bengal, I see over the years more and more the gods are looking like the movie actors and movie actresses. So I was wondering if you've seen the same trend, and how do you explain the artists, rather than imagining these gods, now copying the top Bollywood actors and actresses?
It's a wonderful question, and what it leads to is a kind of warfare among the makers of murtis that I know that's quite amazing. That is, that in theory, how you make a murti in East Bengal is that you recite a mantra of praise. And the more that you recite that mantra of praise, what you're doing is calling down into your consciousness an image of the deity, so that it doesn't come from the world, it comes from the other world. It's exactly what happens when the deity is installed for a puja. The Brahmin will recite a mantra of praise. We're worshiping Saraswati. Oh, Saraswati Ma, you are so beautiful, you are so powerful, you are so wonderful. Please come down and visit us. It's exactly the same mantras that the makers of murtis use. So they call into the mind the deity, and the deity deposits in the mind's eye an image. And then you work exactly, I'm just repeating what I've been told by all the artists, then you work exactly like an artist of realism. The artist of realism looks outside in the world, sees an orange and draws an orange. I look into my mind's eye and I see an image of Saraswati and I make that image. Now, that sounds fine. But many of the customers have different demands. And so that Saraswati, for example, you saw Saraswati at the very beginning, has to be, according to all of my friends, has to be pure white, white as snow. Not white like a white person, but white as snow. But the modern consumers want yellow Saraswati, they want blue Saraswati, they want green Saraswati, and they want Saraswatis that look like Bollywood movie stars. So what that means is that there are some artists who will accommodate those consumers and some artists who won't accommodate those consumers. And so from the outside, what you have is a different demand, so that it's just like an economy. You have supply-side artists and demand-side artists. And so the demand-side artists, so that if you were to go, for example, as I have for Saraswati Puja very frequently in Dhaka City, if you go to Dhaka University, the students demand voluptuous, movie star-looking Saraswatis in a rainbow of colors, and there at Dhaka University you'll find them. But go out to the village of Kagajipara, and there you will find Saraswati having absolutely no resemblance whatsoever to a Bollywood movie star, and she will be absolutely white and her hair will be absolutely black. So what you're really seeing in this is a war between the consumers that's produced a really very powerful war among the makers of those murtis. So more and more and more people who are demanding a kind of modernization of the religion, especially young men, I think that's the real source, young men who want to be worshiping a fashionable and somewhat sexy goddess are prevailing upon the makers of them to come up with images of that kind.
I'd like to add to that,
Yeah.
to that answer. For my book, I was interested in the idea of beauty. And so one of the things I was looking at is what's a beautiful woman and what makes a woman beautiful. And the makers of these same statues in Banaras told me, part of what Henry's talking about, a lot of these statues are commissioned, and some people, the different clubs, there's a festival of Durga Puja where different clubs commission a statue. Those statues are printed in the newspaper side by side. So you want yours, and a lot of people say, we want ours, we're paying for it, we want her to look like the latest Bollywood actress. But what the statue maker told me is, the actress is beautiful. As you know, one of the most important and famous Bollywood actresses right now is a winner of a beauty pageant, right? So what makes that actress beautiful, to have won the beauty pageant, to be this wonderful actress, is that she happens to look like a goddess. So it's not that we're making the goddess to look like a movie actress. She won the beauty pageant. She's a famous, beautiful actress because she happens to have the face of Sita or Parvati. So I think that's a kind of a wonderful signal. What makes the actress beautiful is that she looks like a goddess. Therefore, we're just using her because she looks like a goddess, so we're really presenting the goddess.
I have two questions. Perhaps you answered one. Are there saris that are somewhat similar in color in different parts of the country, in different parts of India? For instance, Pune might be identified.
Are there saris that are different color but different styles? Yeah, one of the things about India is that somebody who's a connoisseur of saris has a collection of saris, and one of the categories in that is a Banarasi sari from Banaras. But there's also a contrasting border sari from the south. There's a Jamdani sari from Bengal. So there's different kinds of saris in different parts of India. That's the first thing. So, you're going to Banaras, can you bring me the specialty sari from that region, which happens to be a Banarasi sari? And then the colors depend on, certain colors are more appropriate for certain fabrics. So chiffon, silk, they have different colors. And the colors, again, depend on the season. Dark, what they call dark, but we would call really bright colors, are woven in the wintertime. They're inappropriate for the summer. The summer has pastels, and the transition seasons have different colors.
My other question would be a little more intelligent if I could name what it is. But the two-piece that both men and women wear, would you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, the two-piece that men and women wear, the women's version is actually three pieces. It's kind of a baggy, it's pants, a tunic, and a scarf. That's the third piece for women. And men only have the long tunic and the pants. Those are called salwar suits or salwar kurta. They're actually, a lot of people will say, they're Muslim dress. The sari is a pure Hindu dress because it's uncut. So in an actual religious ceremony, you wear the uncut. Men wear lungi, which is uncut and draped. The salwar suit has been tailored. It's cut and tailored. That's the first thing that makes it interesting. And a lot of people consider it Muslim dress, but it's very, very common. A lot of people wear them. Punjabis wear them. They're called Punjabis sometimes. That third piece, so there's only three pieces, and what's the relationship between them? That has to do with the fashion, and it changes every 2 months or something. Are the pants tight? Are the pants baggy? Is the top really short? Is it really long? Is the third piece? How do those three things connect to each other is a really, really interesting topic. Wonderful to document because it changes very much. So does the East have fashion? Absolutely. That thing is changing constantly. It's in fashion, and that's just one of the ways to understand fashion in India, actually, is to look at the changing relationship between those three pieces that make a set. What makes them a set has to do with what's currently in fashion.
These are questions about the manufacturing of the saris. When did the Jacquard Loom get to India, and how? And why Muslims doing the manufacturing of a Hindi dress?
Do you know about the loom? When the Jacquard Loom?
Yeah, the Jacquard looms were common in England, and when they went out of use in England, they were exported all over the world. So the English Jacquard looms are not only to be found in India, but very commonly in the interior of Turkey. It's amazing. They became redundant in England. So this would be in the 1880s. So that it's not an ancient form. Although the basic loom that's under that Jacquard apparatus, that's an ancient Indian pit loom. But it just has this Jacquard apparatus attached.
Yeah, Henry is better at looms than I am, so I'm just revealing my... and then the answer about the Muslim weavers making a Hindu outfit, they actually weave that same... The Banarasi sari is a long piece of... The sari is a long piece, 6 meters long. They make a version of that also for their Muslim brides that they cut and make into a 3-piece salwar suit, actually. So it's actually woven differently, but it's the same thing. You take that 6 meters, you make pants, the tunic, and the scarf. So they actually make the clothing for everybody, for both Hindus and Muslims, and all brides, in essence, want to wear that if they can afford it.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
I enjoyed both presentations very much. The production of the saris that you showed was all craft production. And I was in Galway in Ireland a couple of years ago and looking at Irish sweaters. And I was told that many of the sweaters now actually are imported from India, and that in Ireland, most of the people who know how to make the really traditional sweaters are in their 70s and 80s. And I'm wondering, in the production of saris, is there inroads of mass production? In other words, is the craft production still as prevalent as you showed it? And are the skills to do this being passed on to younger generations?
The answer is yes. I said there's 3 weaving neighborhoods in Banaras. There's actually 4 weaving neighborhoods. The 4th one has what they call power looms. Those are not, in that 4th neighborhood, they're not handmade. So absolutely, a lot of saris are machine-made, non-handcrafted. These particular saris are handcrafted. There's certainly other ones cheaper. That's the first answer to your question. The other one is the sari is woven by 2 people sitting side by side. There's a master. If you think of a sari, the bottom border is continuous and the top border is not. So the weaver that sits at the side in which the whole bottom border is woven is the master, and the apprentice sits on the other side. And the young apprentices right now learning to weave that will move their way to being the master weaver. And then the funny thing is, we were in Galway. We went to the Aran Islands off the coast of Ireland, and there's this beautiful fisherman's sweater. And we happened to be there when the shipment had come, and outside we saw, Henry took a picture, boxes that said made in Romania that were sold as Irish Aran Island sweaters inside. So don't trust what you see in a store.
There is, however, or not even however, there's an interesting generalization that has to do with the Banarasi sari, and it has to do with handcraft in general. And that is, we think very often that handcraft is associated with tradition and tradition with poverty. And those handcrafts that are associated with poverty are dying out very rapidly. This is a luxury item. And handcrafts that are associated with luxury items are not dying out so rapidly. So that, for example, as a parallel, in India, that is something that you wouldn't automatically associate it with this. And this is the very fine engraving of brassware. It's not dying out at all, because the brass engravers make very expensive items. It's true in Pakistan, it's true in Moradabad, it's true in East Bengal. So that while we tend to think of a handcraft as inevitably dying out because it's been killed off in the United States, that's not true worldwide. As long as handcraft is allied to a luxury item, it may go on and on and on. And so the reason for the Banarasi sari is that you'll pay enough. And if you paid anybody enough, of course, they would do handcraft. So you have certain kinds of revived arts. Good examples would be Native American arts in the United States. There are today more potters in the Pueblos than there were in the 1880s. There are more carvers on the northwest coast. And the reason is because a woman, my friend Wanda Aragon, can get $2,000 from making a pot that takes her a week. And if you can make $2,000 for a week's worth in pottery, you'll continue to do it. But if you're going to pay somebody $20 for that pot, they're going to give it up just like that. One more example of that kind of luxury work is that Oriental carpets, great Oriental carpets, are still handmade all over the world. And if you don't pay enough, there was a group of tribal women in Turkey called Yacibedur, and they made a very famous kind of Turkish carpet. And they tried to lower the price, and the Yacibedur women took all the carpets into downtown Balıkesir and burned them, and haven't made a carpet since the late 1980s. If you don't pay somebody enough, they won't do it. Conversely, if you pay them enough, people will do it. And so the case of the Banarasi sari is not a bit imperiled, because people they need those saris. I mean, that's the highest class possible thing you can do. There's a kind of a rule. Handcrafts we think of as being associated with poverty, but if they associate it with wealth, and if they have wealthy patrons, they're going forever.
Kind of going along with the same subject, I was wondering if you noticed any impact on the Indian murti makers because I've heard of a lot of murti being mass manufactured in China. I don't know if there was any impact on the people that you've met, or if you noticed anything because of outsourcing of murti making.
I think that's a very good question. It has to do with this would be straight off the ground among my friends. It depends on what you want that object for. If you want it to be decorative, then it can be made anywhere. But very often, if you're really going to use that for worship, that has to be manufactured in a certain way. So that, as a good example, among the Hindu, my deepest knowledge comes from Bangladesh. Among Hindus in Bangladesh, if you make a clay image and fire it, it's no longer useful for worship. You can have it in your house, it can be decorative, it can be beautiful, but you can't actually use it in puja. And so that what is essential to the survival of handcrafted images of murtis is, in this case, not their high cost, but whether or not you can, according to the local tradition of your family and your community, whether you can worship a plastic image from China. In some cases you can, and in some cases you can't. I don't think you could generalize about a population as great as Hindu India one way or another. But certainly those images are to be found in India, and they're to be found on private altars. I see them all the time. That is, an altar of a friend of mine in Banaras might well have a handmade image of stone from Rajasthan, a handmade image in clay from Calcutta, and a plastic image from China, and all of them are a part of the altar. Someone else might feel that simply isn't right, because unless the image is made in a way appropriate to its use in puja. So the key there is not a matter of the economy, it's a matter of the particular local sacred tradition of probably family.
Very nice talk, Henry and Pravina. The question I have for you is when I travel in India and I look at images and paintings that date back to, say, the 1st or 2nd century AD, like the caves at Ajanta Ellora and other temples, including the Helibid and Belur temples close to Bangalore from the 10th and 11th century, I find that these statues and paintings are very modern looking. So look at the hairdo of women, they are beautiful, and they're also more revealing. The clothes are, and when you come to the paintings and statues from, say, the 17th or 18th century or afterwards, they're very conservative. So why do you think that is,
I haven't the slightest idea. I'm afraid that my method falls apart when I can't talk to people. I'm just not particularly smart, not very clever, but I talk to people, and so that I don't. What you say is absolutely true, but what I think you would, I can't really answer your question, but I can make an observation about it, and that is to say that here in the imaging of the eternal, there are fashions in that imaging too. So that if recently Bollywood actresses have been the models for Durga, that's a part of our age. And if in the past more conservative, my guess is that greater conservatism appeared with the presence of Islam and Christianity. That's what I would guess, but I don't have any knowledge. So that before Christianity and Islam offered a more puritanical view to India, the statues were revealing, was your word, absolutely. Are they still that kind of revealing in Tamil Nadu? Yes, they are, but not in North India. And so I think, once again, that there's a much greater impact of Islam and Christianity in North India than South India would seem to support that proposition. But I couldn't offer it to you seriously as a theory. But I think that the presence of Islam and Christianity both, it's kind of a shiver, a kind of freezing up. It seems right, but I don't know.
I just have a statement. I've been asked to kind of give a plug here. We actually have some Banarsi saris in the current exhibit in the Textile Gallery in Quinn Hall, if anybody wants to stop by.
Right? Go to Quinn Hall. Widow Quinn would be weaving those, knitting those sweaters for you, right?
Actually, I have one last question. During the India's independence movement, Gandhi had used textiles and the spinning of the yarn and handmade. During the British period, did the weavers of Banarasi saris or other handmade saris get affected? Did the British stop them from making them, prevent them from getting the yarn and other things that was necessary?
Do you know the answer in Bengal?
The answer, certainly in your Bengal, is absolutely. As it was, the British presence had a violent impact on the weaving of saris in East Bengal. That is, the weaving of what are the Jamdani saris, the weaving of the Muslims, the most superfine textiles perhaps ever made in world history, were almost killed off by the British. If you think about how tremendous the industry in the production of beautiful cotton wear was in East Bengal just before the British arrival, and what happened, it was like a dying spider. That tradition contracted into a tiny area along the Shitalaksha River. Fortunately, it never died out entirely, and today, or maybe the past 25 years, there's been a very strong revival of the weaving of that very, very beautiful muslin wear along that one section. But basically in Bengal, the British did everything they could to destroy the sari weaving industry. That's the cotton weaving industry, so I don't know the story in Banaras.
I don't know the answer to Banaras, actually, but I'm just going to stick with the plugging things. Henry has a book called Art and Life in Bangladesh, in which he spends a lot of time looking at the weaving of Jamdani saris, and that book is out of print, but it's going to be coming back in print. So that's one of the things to look for. He also has looked at the weaving of saris, a different kind of a sari, and therefore knew the answer to that question in Bengal.
Bengali story is one of the, I think, tragic stories of manufacture in the world.
Well, I know as a woman of Indian origin, my favorite thing is to buy saris.
Damn right.
So I think Henry and Pravina gave us a look into the images of daily wear through saris as well as the sacred images. At least one of my memories coming from Bengal is we have these puja time, and whereas Saraswati puja or Durga puja, we go to this particular part of Calcutta where the images are for sale. It's like buying a sari. And then you pick the gods and goddesses based on these features and looks. So maybe you could talk about that, how the consumer is shaping, which you talked about, the demand side and supply side. Before we end tonight, I want to formally thank Sabrina Chaudhary for doing the henna tonight. I'd like to thank Linda Welters from the textiles marketing to put us in touch with Henry and Pravina. And tonight we also have present two of our financial supporters, Vice President Basilinski and Dr. Verma and Mrs. Verma, who have financially supported the colloquium. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on December 1st. Please give a real warm thank you to Pravina and Henry.